Oh, we're going to start off with another piece by Michel Magnani, who wrote the Jewish Suite. This is another piece he wrote a few years later called The Blues. You'll hear the beginning of this will make you think of Rhapsody in Blue. It has that wonderful glissando up. That was written by, of course, George Gershwin, also known as Jakob Gershowitz when he was born. And he was one of the great Tin Pan Alley pianists. But he was able to sort of cross over that world from the popular to the classical with his Rhapsody in Blue, an epic piece that was performed in a concert hall as well, the Aeolian Hall in 1924. That glissando, that clarinet opening, was actually not written out by Gershwin originally. He had sort of just a traditional scale in there. But Ross Gorman, who was the clarinetist in the Paul Whiteman band, I don't think he was Jewish, but he had played in some klezmer bands, and he knew how to sort of do that klezmer slide, and it really has that klezmer feel as it winds its way up to that great beginning. But it's actually not Rhapsody in Blue that this is based upon. It's another piece by Gershwin, American in Paris, which Gershwin wrote 4 years later in 1928, after his travels to Paris. He actually went over there to hang out with Maurice Ravel, the great French composer. Ravel had actually come over to the United States and in fact had his 50th birthday party in the United States, and when asked what he wanted for his birthday, he said, "I want Gershwin." He had heard Gershwin's music, so Gershwin came to the party. They really hung out, got along well. And Ravel wrote one of the early pieces that's called The Blues. His violin sonata, there's a movement to that called The Blues, and it's a really fascinating take on that. I think it was 1925. And then Gershwin decided he would go to Paris. He actually thought maybe he would take some lessons from Ravel in orchestration, because Gershwin was largely self-taught, and he knew he wanted to write a big orchestral piece. But when he got over there and asked Ravel, Ravel said, "Why would you want to be a second-rate Ravel when you're already a first-rate Gershwin?" So he didn't really give him any training in orchestration, but instead they walked around Paris for a couple days, took in all of the scenes, and that's really the basis of American in Paris, strolling around the city. And of course what Gershwin really loved was the out-of-tune Parisian car horn that you hear in that piece. In fact, he went to a junkyard and got 4 of those car horns of different sizes and brought them back and used them in his orchestration for American in Paris. But of course, in the middle of that piece, there's that part where sort of the American is lonely for America, and he goes into a bar supposedly, and we hear the blues come out. And so that middle section of the American in Paris is what this piece is based upon, and I think it really captures that quality. So here's Michel Magnani, The Blues. I told you it's going high. We're going high in this half. All right, so now we're going to move to a composer you probably do not know. Simon Sargon is his name. I didn't know him until a few years ago. I was asked to do a lecture about Jewish composers from rather strange places. Sargon grew up in India, and there's not a lot of great Jewish composers coming out of India, but he was born in Mumbai, India in 1938, and ended up coming to the United States to do his training at Brandeis University. He was valedictorian there, and then to Juilliard, where he studied composition. And in fact, took some lessons with the great Darius Milhaud, the French composer who had come over escaping the Nazis during the war, had taught out at Mills College and had some incredible students like Dave Brubeck and Burt Bacharach and others. He then was invited to go to Israel in the early 70s to teach at the Hebrew University there. He actually ran the opera program at Hebrew University for several years. And then came back to Dallas, Texas, where for about 25 years he was the director of music at Temple Emmanuel, which is one of the largest Reformed congregations in the United States. And while he was there, composed quite a lot of liturgical, really interesting music, and was able to win awards as he was given an honorary award by the American Conference of Cantors for his outstanding contributions to Jewish music and Jewish life. This is a piece that he wrote, again, I believe in the early 1990s, called klezmusic, and it has all of the qualities that we heard in that piece, Shalom Aleichem. Rav Feidman starts off with a very long clarinet solo where he gets to sort of explore all the ways that he can growl and burp and do whatever he does into the clarinet. I call it a boip. And all of these wonderful qualities of klezmer music, and then we get into a really fun, exciting thing that drives us to the end. Here's klezmusic by Simon Sargon. To a couple more pieces by the great Benny Goodman. I didn't mention early on that Benny Goodman not only was a great jazz clarinetist, but he also played some good classical clarinet and played the Mozart concerto several times. And most importantly, he got some great composers to write music for him to play, including Mio wrote a piece for him, Poulenc, Hindemith, Bernstein, Aaron Copland wrote a clarinet concerto. So through Benny Goodman, we have some wonderful classical music in the literature. In fact, he was supposed to premiere Poulenc's sonata in 1963 in New York with Poulenc at the piano. Unfortunately, Poulenc died right before he was supposed to come over, and he ended up premiering it with Leonard Bernstein on the piano, which is pretty good too. But according to his children, he was practicing the clarinet almost all the time. Benji, who we heard Benji's Bubbles, described how, she said, he practiced all the time. He always seemed to have the clarinet in his hands. He even practiced during the commercial breaks of the World Series. In fact, he actually died of a heart attack in his apartment while practicing the Mozart concerto. So he died in the way he would have wanted, with that clarinet in his hands. But we're going to do this, the first piece we're going to do is actually called Grand Slam Now. He did love baseball, but the original title that Seth told me was a great title. I wish it was kept. It was originally called Boy Meets Goy. The record company didn't think that was going to sell well, so it changed to Grand Slam, but you can hear it on YouTube. It's a wonderful duet. It stars a very young Charlie Christian guitarist performing on that, and a wonderful song. And then, going back again to that classical music, we will finish with the Paganini Caprice number 24. Paganini, of course, one of the great classical violinists. That's one of the most famous tunes out there. And this is Benny Goodman's kind of jazz take on that Caprice. couldn't get this through this program without a little fiddler on the roof.
No. You know.
He's going to complain again.
You know,
He's always kvetching.
I'm going to kvetch. You know, it breaks my heart. I mean, every day I go to sleep with tears welling up in my eyes when I think about this, about how different my life would be today if only they had named a clarinetist on the roof. I mean, you know, I'd be a rich man.
He worked on that joke. But yeah, as I mentioned, the violin was a far more important instrument originally in klezmer, and Shalom Aleichem, when he wrote these stories, sort of used that as his basis. This was a huge hit in 1964, which surprised a lot of people, because many people thought it was just too Jewish to play on Broadway. But it became the longest running Broadway musical, and it held that for almost 10 years until Grease took over that record, which is horrifying. It's just a wonderful musical. Now, some of the Jewish people thought it was very watered down Jewish. Philip Roth called it, what do you call it, shtetl kitsch, which I think is pretty funny. And it certainly does not take the dark side of Shalom Aleichem stories, which are pretty dark, and they show the brutality of the pogroms and the Russians there. And of course, at the end of Shalom Aleichem stories, Tevye is left all by himself. His wife has died, the kids are gone, and it's a rather sad sort of ending. But that doesn't work on Broadway so well, so there's a sort of hope that they're going to meet up in the United States, which is certainly, as I meant, a lot of these Jewish people would get over here. But it's just a wonderful show, and there's a great movie, of course, that came out in 1971. So we're going to do If I Were a Rich Man. Feel free to sing along if you want. One of the greatest clarinetists of the 20th century, perhaps the greatest clarinetist of all time, really. But a man with a lot of complicated issues. You'll hear Seth has a wonderful story of almost meeting Artie Shaw, which will be fascinating. But Artie Shaw, some of you may not know this, but his birth name was Avraham Ben Yitzhak Arshovsky. He grew up in the synagogue in New Haven, Connecticut, but was bullied by a lot of kids for being Jewish there. And so when he had a chance, he said, I'm getting rid of that name as soon as I can. And actually, originally, he had decided to go with Art Shaw. But tell us that story again.
Then it was the president of RCA Records, when they signed him, who changed Art Shaw to Artie Shaw, because as he said at the time, Art Shaw sounds too much like a sneeze.
But Art, he definitely had some issues with his father, psychological issues along the way that would come out in his career. But he was also a very narcissistic guy. He really thought that he was sort of the greatest in the world. There's a wonderful, his father was friends with William Saroyan, the great novelist. And William's son, Aram, remembers sort of talking to Artie as a young kid and throughout his life, and he said, his ultimate pastime was telling and retelling his stories. And he was always the central figure of his stories. And the attitude in the stories was always the same, from beginning to end. I'm a gifted, supremely gifted human being, and the world has endeavored to drive me crazy. So he really just couldn't deal with a lot of things in life. He started his career, sort of made a wonderful recording of Begin the Beguine, the great Cole Porter song, and that really got him started. He became quite big, quite fast. And there was a famous concert as he was reaching the height of his fame in 1939 at the Hotel Pennsylvania in New York City. He played the first half of that concert with his band, and then he left and went to Acapulco and left the band behind. No, you stay here, don't go. And afterwards, when asked why he did that, he said, I wanted to resign from the planet, not just music. It stopped being fun with success. Money got in the way. Everybody got greedy, including me. Fear set in. I was miserable when I became a commodity. And he would often call his audience morons. He just didn't seem to get along with them. He actually couldn't understand why all the Bobby Soxers were dancing to his music. As he said, I could never understand why people wanted to dance to my music. I thought I made it good enough just to listen to. But he ultimately would continue performing. But in 1954, at the height of his career, again, 43 years old at the time, he put down his clarinet and never touched it again. And he lived into his late 80s, in the early 2000s as he finally died, asking why he did that. Again, he said, it was like having a gangrenous arm. The only thing you can do is amputate it. Obviously, you're going to miss the arm, but if you don't cut it off, you'll die. So he really just couldn't deal with that clarinet, didn't want to deal with it. Now, on the positive side for Artie Shaw, he was a very good-looking man and ended up being married to 8 different women, including Lana Turner and Ava Gardner. I think he had a fling with Judy Garland, with Lena Horne. As he said later, "You have no idea of the women I didn't marry." He got around, but I'm sure he was very difficult to listen to live with, because none of those marriages lasted too long. After he gave up his clarinet, he went on the college lecture circuit, had a few wonderful names for his lectures. One was called "The Artist in a Material Society." Another was called "Psychotherapy and the Creative Artist," which he needed. And my favorite one, "Consecutive Monogamy and Ideal Divorce." That was a big hit. He wrote a couple books. The first one is actually quite a good book. It's an autobiography, kind of a stream of conscious autobiography of his life. It's called "The Trouble with Cinderella: Why There Is No Fairy Tales in Life." But his second book, again, talking about all of his marriages, it was a great title. It's called "I Love You, I Hate You, Drop Dead." So he was not an easy man, one of my favorite quotes he talked about, he just thought the audiences were not all that intelligent. He said, and I'm sorry for my language, but this is Artie Shaw's quote, "No matter how carefully and assiduously and how deeply you bury shit, the American public will find it and buy it in large quantities." And he also was very disturbed, I think, in the jazz world with all the drugs. He said, "Jazz was born out of the whiskey bottle, was raised on marijuana, and will expire on cocaine." Now, I'll hand it over to Seth, who's got a wonderful story about trying to meet Artie Shaw.
Okay, all right. So this is the story of how I became close personal friends with Artie Shaw. So this takes place end of the last millennium, 1998. I was at the start of my music career, and I was really going through an Artie Shaw phase, where I was really just, getting every recording I could get hands on, and just trying to learn it. I was just really obsessed with the music. And my wife and I were newly married, no kids yet, and we were taking a vacation out to California. We were going to rent a car, drive up and down the coast. Not much of a plan. So while we were preparing to go, a musician friend of mine said, "While you're out there, you should try to meet Artie Shaw." I thought that was kind of crazy. But there was a new thing at this time, 1998, this brand new thing called the Internet. And there was actually a website for Artie Shaw. It sold some of his recordings and sold some of his books too. And it had an address on the website. And the address was in Newbury Park, California, which is a wealthy suburb of Los Angeles. I knew from other stuff I had read that he lived in Newbury Park. Now, I thought maybe that address was like a business office or a manager or something, but I scribbled it down and threw it in my luggage. All right, we're out in California. We're on the LA freeway. There's an exit. It says Newbury Park. I'm like, let's check this out. So we go off the exit. This is, of course, before the days of GPS or cell phones or any stuff like that. And we pull into a gas station right off the exit. I go into the gas station and go to the guy behind the counter. I said, "Hey, do you know where this address is?" The guy was really helpful. He said, "Yeah, it's like right up the hill. You're 5 minutes away." So he gave me directions. So we follow these directions, take us into a nice middle-class neighborhood, lots of, single-family homes. But as we follow directions, we get to a cul-de-sac. And at the end of the cul-de-sac, there's one house that's much bigger than the others. That's this address. And there's like an iron wrought fence with all these signs on it saying, "No trespassing, violators will be shot on sight." Wow, okay, so we get out, park the car. There's an electronic buzzer, an intercom on the fence. So we press it, and my wife and I saw very clearly a curtain part and then close. And no answer. Ring it again. Nothing. Again, nothing. Finally, a cat wanders out. I petted Artie Shaw's cat. But no answer. So we left. Now, I became fixated on this. Like for the next day or so, all I could talk about was, I think that was really his house. I think it was really him there. And I think I was getting on my wife's nerves. So finally in the hotel room, like a day later, she said, "Well, why don't you call him?" I'm like, "That's silly. I don't have his number." She said, "Call information." Like, he's not going to be listed. She's like, "Well, just try." I'm like, "All right, fine." So I called information. Again, this is back in the days when you got a real person at information. And the nice lady said, you know, city, state, whatever, listing of like Newbury Park, California, Artie Shaw. She says, well, no, I'm sorry, I don't have anything with that listing. I'm like, oh, okay, and I'm about to hang up. And she says, well, I do have an A Shaw. And I'm like, well, is it this address? I read her the address. She says, yes, that's the address. So I got this number. So the next day, we went back to that same exit on the highway, went back to that same gas station. Of course, like I said, we didn't have cell phones. So I go to a payphone. If anyone knows what that is, I can explain to you later. Go to a payphone, and I call the number. Gruff old man voice, hello? I'm like, hi, I'm trying to reach Mr. Artie Shaw. Who wants to talk to him? Well, I said, my name is Seth Kibel, I'm a clarinetist, I'm a big fan. He can't see anyone. And at this point, I knew it was him. I mean, I recognized the voice. I'm like, well, Mr. Shaw, I really apologize, but I'm just down the road. I'm at this gas. It would mean the world to me. You've been a hero of mine. I can't see you. I can't see anyone. And at this point, it became like, one of those TV hostage situations where it's just, keep them on the phone. So I just kept on trying to kind of almost argue with them. I'm like, I really apologize for the imposition, but I'm at this, whatever gas station it was right down the road. If I could just shake your hand, it would mean the world to me, and I'm such a big fan, studied your music. Yeah, no, I can't see you. I can't see anyone. I can't see anyone. Finally, at one point, he says, I'm an old man living by myself. You could tie me up and steal all my things. Which hadn't occurred to me. But anyway, finally, my Hail Mary pass is I had a copy of the autobiography that Dan mentioned, The Trouble with Cinderella, and I had it with me. And I figured that might impress him since not many people bought it. And I said, well, I've got your autobiography. If you could just sign it for me, that would mean the world to me. And he says, mail it to me and I'll sign it. And then finally hung up. So that was it. So we finished the vacation, went home. I wrote a long love letter to Artie Shaw. All about, how much he was a hero of mine, how much I loved his music. I talked about myself. I sent him a recording of some of my early recordings and the autobiography. Watched the mailbox for 6 months. After 6 months, I suddenly got a plain brown envelope in the mail. I opened it up. Inside was the autobiography and nothing else. Oh. And I flipped through every page of that book. No signature, no nothing. Yeah. So nonetheless, it's okay, Artie, we're going to play your concerto anyway. Wait, sorry. It's okay, Artie, we're going to play your concerto anyway.
So, even though he was a great clarinetist and a brilliant mind, he was not a nice guy. But we are going to play this wonderful concerto that he wrote really for his big band. And in the middle is a big drum solo, but I can't afford any of that. So I'm going to do it all, and it's really fun. It does sort of blend in the blues and the boogie-woogie that we have, but there are these middle sections where the clarinet really sounds like the klezmer clarinet we heard that he goes back to his youth in the synagogue as he was learning clarinet. Here's the Artie Shaw Clarinet Concerto.